Okay, there's a natural lull in the room, so we're going to start. Good afternoon, I'm Yolanda Wu. I'm happy to welcome you here. I'm a co-founder and board chair of A Better Balance. We're really thrilled to see you here at our Moving Family Forwards conference. As you probably know, this is a conference that's celebrating 10 years of A Better Balance. And I'm so excited. We have a full agenda of speakers. I'm very excited to hear what everybody has to say. Before we get there, I just ask you to indulge me for a short moment to take a brief trip back in time to 2006 to answer the question, why in the world did we start A Better Balance, a brand new organization? So back in 2006, feminism had eradicated most overt barriers to equality. But we saw caregiving as the next frontier. The motherhood penalty was alive and well. Motherhood was making women poor. In fact, Anne Crittenden, who's sitting here in the front row, in her book, The Price of Motherhood, posited that a college-educated woman would lose $1 million in her lifetime from having a child. 10 years ago, the work-family debate was all about women making personal choices. The emphasis was on professional women opting out of working once they had a baby. The needs of low-wage women, many of whom were living paycheck to paycheck, were really not on the radar screen at all. Today, the public conversation around work-family has changed dramatically. We hear much less about the so-called mommy wars, and ABB has been at the forefront of a movement to provide policy supports for working families. Let me just give you 3 quick examples. 10 years ago, we had and still have a federal law that provides for unpaid family and medical leave. And California was the only state in the nation that provided for paid family leave. Today, many states and cities have enacted paid family leave laws and are using our model in doing so. Politicians from President Obama to many of those who want to replace him are talking about paid family leave. Even some Republicans are saying paid family leave is a good thing. 10 years ago, San Francisco was the only city in the country that provided for paid sick leave. Today, paid sick leave laws that we have written or helped write are on the books in 5 states and 21 localities. These laws cover more than 35 million people nationwide. In New York City, 3.4 million workers are now entitled to paid sick days for themselves or their family, and 1.2 million of those workers did not have even a single paid sick leave before our law was enacted. 10 years ago, the Federal Pregnancy Discrimination Act said that pregnant workers must be treated as well or as poorly as similarly situated employees. That federal law remains unchanged today, but ABB has forged an entirely new area of advocacy that we call pregnant workers' fairness to fill the gap in existing law. Our advocacy is focusing on helping low-wage women who want to work and may need a modest accommodation in their workplace to keep them healthy and on the job. ABB has been a leader in developing the newly enacted New York City Pregnant Workers Fairness Act and also the New York State Women's Equality Act. These laws and similar laws in dozens of states and localities are helping millions of pregnant workers around the country stay healthy and working. So now let's zoom back out to the big picture. 10 years ago, there were the separate fields of work family, women's rights, and economic justice. As women's rights lawyers, we knew there was a better way. We knew there was a way to integrate these disparate fields to create a systemic solution to the problems that we saw. And so we started talking. We were a bunch of lawyers. I remember many late-night conversations at the Tea Lounge in Park Slope. We actually had about a year of weekly meetings at the old Balducci's at 8th Avenue and 14th Street in Manhattan. As you may know, both Tea Lounge and Balducci's are gone, but I'm proud to say that A Better Balance is here to stay. As a bunch of lawyers, we were very careful from our early days. We incorporated, we became a 501c3, and we wrote a white paper. We were so proud of our first position paper. We sent out our position paper to people that we respected. A lot of them agreed with us and thought it was brilliant. A lot of people loved the ideas, but no surprise, no one was beating down the door to give us money. So we rolled up our sleeves and started doing the work. We were an all-volunteer staff and board for quite a while, and we started with paid sick days when allies in the living wage arena asked us to look into that issue. Our initial funding was to work on paid sick leave, but from the start, we had a broad framework that encompasses everything that we're working on today. The last 10 years have really felt both like a blur and like an eternity. We've had so many ups and downs, so much has been achieved, and there's so much left to do. I leave you with this idea that we have a three-pronged strategy of legislation, litigation, and public education. So ABB has had a hand in legislative reform in 34 states, and there's no doubt that states and localities are true laboratories for change in our country. Second, we provide frontline free legal services through our hotline and clinic, and we bring impact litigation cases to change the law. Finally, we're at the forefront of educating workers about their rights. Our book, Babygate, and its accompanying website are a unique state-by-state guide to the law, and it's also a practical handbook for new parents on what to expect in the workplace. We certainly have not done this alone. We have so many wonderful local, state, and national partners and funders. I want to especially thank our corporate sponsors for today, the law firms of Emery, Chelley, Brinkerhoff, and Abity, Morrison and Forrester, Outen and Golden, and Skadden. Thank you to the NYU School of Law for hosting the conference today, and thank you to our allies at every level of government, federal, state, and city. And with that, I turn it over to my colleague, Dina Bakst. Thank you.
As Yolanda said, I'm Dina Bakst, a fellow co-founder of A Better Balance, and I'm thrilled to see so many friends and colleagues in the room. Thank you so much for joining us. Right now, I have the great pleasure of introducing Comptroller Scott Stringer. Scott is a native New Yorker first elected to the New York State Assembly in 1992. After serving 2 terms as Manhattan Borough President, he was elected Comptroller in 2013. Throughout his career, Scott has worked to build a robust, inclusive economy and a work culture that treats employment and family life as complementary, not competing interests. Scott worked closely with A Better Balance to launch Families and Flexibility, a campaign highlighting the benefits of flexible work arrangements, paid family leave, and other progressive workplace policies. He has also introduced legislation that promises to improve the lives of working women and men across the 5 boroughs and throughout the Empire State. Just this fall, a bill he introduced to allow pregnant women to sign up for health insurance year-round was signed into law by Governor Cuomo, making New York the first state in the country to provide this basic protection for women and families. As the city's chief financial officer and the father of 2 young sons, Scott knows firsthand how important these issues are to our families and our economy. I distinctly recall way back in 2008 when Scott served as Manhattan Borough President and reached out to A Better Balance because he wanted to establish a paid parental leave policy for his office. He really valued his pregnant staffers and other workers who had caregiving responsibilities and thought it was terribly unfair. What a visionary he was. It is my great pleasure to introduce a true champion for working families, Comptroller Scott Stringer.
Thank you very much, and happy anniversary. 10 years of great work. Yolanda, you're absolutely right. This is an extraordinary organization, and I want to give Yolanda, Dina, and Sherry a big round of applause for being trailblazers. Really trailblazers. And I want to thank A Better Balance. I feel like I've come of age with this organization. When I was Manhattan Borough President, it was true. We really wanted to see if the city, or at least the Office of Borough President, could pay for leave for women who were pregnant in the office. And it turned out that we couldn't do that without a citywide policy. Think about where we were a few years ago. And at the time, I was thinking about that for others in my office. Little did I know that when I turned 50 and got my AARP card, and then got married with that AARP card, that I would have 2 little boys. And it gave me a new meaning of a better life balance. Now my life starts at 5 a.m. And it is really extraordinary to see what a little flex time in the world can do to raise children and provide a family with two equal careers the opportunity to flourish. And A Better Balance understood this before anybody else. So I applaud you today. And thanks to A Better Balance, and with support from Mayor de Blasio, we have seen real progress in this fight. Many New York City employees enjoyed paid family leave. Working people throughout the city have paid sick leave. And we're in the midst of a real movement for workplace practice and wages that support healthy families. But we have a lot of work ahead of us. The job of government is to build people up. And here in New York City, home to the strongest workforce in the nation, we have an obligation to lead the way on workplace reforms. Reforms that allow for real work-life balance. Because no New Yorker should ever have to choose between keeping their job and caring for their loved one. Maintaining steady work and a healthy family should not be a perk for the very rich or the upper class. Every New Yorker deserves to visit their child at school or check in on an ailing parent. The truth is, far too many workers cannot access the flexible work schedules they need in order to lead successful, happy lives, not without putting their jobs on the line. Last fall, my office partnered with A Better Balance to conduct a survey of over 1,100 New Yorkers on workplace policies. And the results show an urgent need for government action. Nearly half of those surveyed said they don't have access to flexible work arrangements. I'm talking about a single mom in the Bronx who worries about holding on to a 9-to-5 office job and also taking care of her kids. Or a fast food worker in Brooklyn whose shift changes without notice, keeping him from caring for an elderly mother. We need measures in place that allow those employees to succeed and to arrange schedules that work for their families without fear of retaliation from the employer. It is outrageous that in 2016, even the most basic requests to accommodate working families are treated as impositions. And that's why we've called for the right to request laws that break down the stigma associated with flexible work. These laws don't mandate flexibility, but they provide a framework for these conversations to take place without fear of retaliation. It's smart policy, it's a first step, it works. But let's be clear, we can't stop here. We need to see real progress on paid family leave, a concept that held support from a full 80% of the people we surveyed. And 86% of New Yorkers want this now. The issue must be addressed at the federal level, but we also want this for New Yorkers today, not tomorrow. Statewide, a staggering 6.4 million New Yorkers, or nearly 9 out of 10 working people, do not have access to paid family leave. We should all be able to care for loved ones without sacrificing economic security. It's a basic right, not a benefit that should be levied at any employer's discretion. And that's why I've called on Albany to pass the New York Paid Family Leave Insurance Act. And the good news is we have a governor who understands this and is leading the charge in Albany to make this a top priority. And I'm so glad Lieutenant Governor Hochul is here because she's spearheading that effort. Please give her a round of applause. We have a real leader in this fight. One other pitch. I believe strongly that next on the agenda has to be flex time and a $15 minimum wage. We've got to make sure that families can provide for their children. Today in New York City, a city of great wealth, a city of great progress, a city of great aspiration is making headway. But we do have issues we have to tackle. A lot of people are working harder than ever before in low-wage jobs, and yet we're now finding that they can't pay the rent, they can't provide to put food on the table. We have a huge homeless explosion. 23,000 children sleep in homeless shelters every single night. It's the invisible city that nobody sees. We never see it. In fact, we sometimes spend more time talking about moving homeless from the streets into shelters than thinking about ways to keep people out of those shelters in the first place to lift them up into permanent housing and real jobs. So I know A Better Balance is really about looking at the whole picture. You have done the studies. You have built the coalitions. You did it with paid sick, and you haven't stopped yet. And I look forward to addressing from homelessness to a real wage to making sure that we have flex work schedules so family life balance is not only good for some, but is good for the total picture. My commitment as controller will be to continue to work with you, to continue to make sure that we build that necessary coalition. As someone who watches out for the money of this city, and the money is in the bank, I want you to know that what's good economic policy is good policy for working people. They actually go hand in hand. So happy anniversary. Keep it up. It's great to see all of you. And you are leaders in this national effort, and you should be very proud of your accomplishments. Thank you so much for having me today.
That was incredible. Thank you so much again. It's a real privilege to have you as a partner in this fight. It is now my great privilege to introduce our keynote speaker, Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul. Governor Hochul has a long history of public service, serving as a Western New York Town Council member, county clerk, and then congresswoman representing New York's 26th congressional district. The Lieutenant Governor has been a key ally in women's equality as we fight for working families. And now we are absolutely thrilled to have her fighting with Governor Cuomo to enact the strongest paid family leave law in the nation. So I think we need to give her. She has also been a strong advocate for Enough is Enough sexual assault prevention program and has helped spread the message to both the public and to college campuses across the state. And she's been on the ground working for a $15 per hour minimum wage in every corner of the state. She also maintains one of the most demanding schedules of any state elected official. And during her first year in office, which she just completed, she visited each of the state's 62 counties, logging enough miles to circle the globe twice. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, the 77th Lieutenant Governor of the state of New York, Kathy Hochul.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina, and good afternoon, everyone. Boy, what a nice turnout. I thought you'd all be playing hooky at Washington Square Park over there on this spectacular afternoon. And Yolanda, and Dina, Sherry, and others who really were the trailblazers, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for putting these issues on the public agenda a decade ago, and I'm so glad you're taking this opportunity to sit back and just look how far we've come, because sometimes we look back, compare ourselves during Women's History Month, which we're celebrating now, and look at what people did in 1848, where we had in New York State the first Women's Rights Convention, and how brave and bold those trailblazers were, or the fact that we're now celebrating, and the governor just is convening a commission to commemorate the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote in the state of New York, which will be in 2017, and a commission that I'll be chairing. We look at them and we think, well, you know, boy, how do we even, like, these are giants. I mean, how do we even compare with them? But I know that history is going to be kind to all of you, because they're going to look at how we were able to create the next movement, and your willingness to use your time as young attorneys, still young attorneys, to be leaders on these issues and to help define the conversation through your advocacy and never letting up is something that we're going to look back and say thank you. I mean, whether it's 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, I want you to know that you've changed the conversation, and when these bills become law, and I feel very confident that we're going to get family leave through this year. I never make promises in this business, but I promise that the governor and I are going to continue fighting hard for this. I want you to know that you should give yourselves a huge round of applause for starting these conversations a long time ago. So let's give it up again for people of Better Balance. You know, I use occasions like this to just sort of reflect on my own life, and because we're all a product of our upbringing, and how when I was first a young staffer for Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, I was an attorney on his staff a long time ago, and I was pregnant with my son at the time, and I was weighing the question, you know, what do? I love my job. I'm on Capitol Hill. This is all I ever wanted to do was work for a senator, and I achieved that at the age of 26 or so. A few years later, pregnant with our first child, My husband and I had both been at large law firms. Both of us left to go to public service, so our income was about as low as it could get at the time. And I was weighing, am I able to leave the workforce and stay home for a little while, or do I have to get right back to work? And it was tough, and again, it wasn't a difference of putting bread on the table or a lot of other challenges. I felt fortunate, but I just remember at the time, like, you don't even know what's right or wrong. I mean, is it, should you be home for a couple weeks, a couple months, a couple years? And these are things that we wrestle with. And in 1993, when we finally passed the Family Medical Leave Act, which everyone thought was groundbreaking, for God's sake, we're going to give you unpaid time at home, okay? We thought this was a big deal back then. So the fact that we're having the conversation, fast forward, now I'll tell you, the kids who I was wrestling these challenges with a long time ago are now childbearing age themselves. My kids have now grown up in an area where I want my daughter, who just got married, to be able to stay home if she wants to and get the help she needs in the early months. So I am so proud to be able to be a partner with a governor of our state who really gets it. I may be the only female statewide elected official, but we have a governor who understands the issues facing women in this state more than you would even imagine. Now, maybe it's the influence of 3 strong-willed daughters. Maybe it's Sandra Lee. Maybe it's his strong mother, his sisters. But whatever it is, he is such a true believer in women's equality and championing issues that affect our lives. And last year, when we were campaigning in 2014, the year before, we went all over the state of New York in a bus. And it was the Women's Equality Agenda bus, and we brought to the forefront so many issues that affect women, pay equity and family leave and other issues. But the governor this year has really, really elevated the conversation and said, in his State of the State address, which is a statement of your priorities for the entire year for the state of New York, he put forward the most ambitious plan for paid leave that we would have, not just in New York, but in the entire nation. And I think that's something you should be proud of as New Yorkers. And again, we are in those conversations now. This is the time when people need to weigh in. Your voices need to be heard all across the state of New York, because there's nothing we'd like more than, by the end of this session, say that we stood up for the women and men of this state who sometimes just need a little more support. Help us during those tough decisions, whether it's the new baby at home, whether it's taking care of a sick child, as I often had to do, or even taking care of an elderly parent or a relative. I mean, women, we know we're the sandwich people. I mean, we're the ones who have to take care of the kids and the adults. And even as a member of Congress, I still remember being on the plane coming back from Washington, getting messages from the doctors that my Aunt Sophie, who I was the primary caregiver for, had fallen and was at the hospital, and could I go right there from the airport. I was constantly taking my elderly aunt to doctor appointments and having to take time off. I was a member of Congress. Luckily, I was not going to get fired from my job. But I also knew the time involved in taking care of someone else. It doesn't just stop when your children are launched. It continues with parents and elderly relatives. So we have to do something. We have to say, you know what? This is the state of New York. We are better than this. We are better than this. We put a premium on people's lives, the quality of their life, the balance issues that you brought to the forefront. And why not give people the dignity of knowing they can keep their job if they want to be home with a new child or take care of someone in need? Why don't we say that we're a compassionate society, that we're better than you might hear in the national debate, for example? Kelly and I were just talking about this. I won't even go there. That is another forum. I'd be happy to come back and have that conversation. But despite what you may see in televised debates, I believe we're better people than that. And for us to have a governor and hopefully a state legislature that says, you know, we have the ability to pass a law that can be a game changer for the people's lives in the state of New York, and why not do it? The studies show that where they have done this in other cities, that it does not affect the productivity of individuals. It is a short time in your life when you need this help. It helps with employer retention. More people can stay on a job when they have this extra assistance. And why not just do the right thing? Why make life so difficult for people? So that's exactly what's behind this push. The governor gave a heart-wrenching speech when he talked about how conflicted he was when he was running for re-election as governor at the time his own father was dying, and how he had to make choices of where to be at any given time. And he regretted that he could not have been with his dad even longer during those final months and weeks and hours. And so that is really what brought him to this issue today, saying, you know what, it even affected me that deeply, but what's it doing to people who live paycheck to paycheck? When we know that people in poverty have almost no money for their savings, if they take even a week off work, it can wipe out their life savings forever. These are real-life issues and concerns that we care about, and that is also why, simultaneously, and this is what I love about the governor, he thinks bold, he's ambitious, why not raise the minimum wage in the state of New York so people do not have to live in poverty working 40 hours a week? What a radical idea is that, right? And I feel strongly, as I've crossed the state, you've heard I've covered every corner of the state many times. Yes, there's concern of people from the business community, but the governor's saying we're going to help them out. We're going to figure out a way to alleviate the burden on small businesses. We get that. But on the other hand, we as taxpayers end up subsidizing the people who are earning the minimum wage currently because they often need other forms of government assistance, whether it's rent assistance, food assistance, living support. So we are actually subsidizing this. And this is when we went around the state last year talking about raising the minimum wage for the fast food workers. The fact that we are subsidizing the tune of $700 million a year. We as taxpayers subsidizing the employees of McDonald's and Burger King because they don't pay them enough and we have to subsidize them. So whether you want to do it for compassionate reasons, which motivates me, or just analytically as a taxpayer, do you want your taxpayer dollars to have to go pay to subsidize the income of people because the employers will not pay them a living wage? I mean, that's the debate we're having right now with respect to minimum wage. So these two issues are really coming to the forefront at the same time, and that is why the work you did here, the work that's going to continue to do, and the voices that are represented in this room, we've got to be heard outside this area. I'm telling you, outside the city of New York. Having represented the most conservative district in the state of New York in Congress, viewpoints that are shared here universally are not always felt in other areas. So we've got to get beyond these boundaries. We've got to go out and tell these stories and help people understand that in a state as great as New York and as a country as great as ours, we should not be one of 3 countries in the industrialized world that does not offer paid family leave. And having spent some time in Congress and seeing gridlock at its worst, gridlock on steroids, I feel that we're going to make the most difference right here in our state capitol with a governor who does get it. So thank you for your work, and thank you for including me. Thank you.